In the days when the hearts of many grew restless, and the land was filled with quiet murmurs of longing, there arose whispers of a great shift. It was said that the Lord Almighty was stirring his people, preparing them for a new season of purpose, growth, and divine revelation. Among them were those who felt a strange unease, a holy discontent that they could not ignore. And so, the story begins, as it has for generations, with a call from heaven. There was a man named Elias, a humble laborer in the fields. For years, Elias worked under the sun, toiling faithfully, though his heart grew heavier with each passing season. The fields yielded their fruit, but his soul yearned for something more. One evening, as Elias knelt in prayer beneath the old oak tree, he cried out, "Lord, why does my heart feel so restless? Have I not served faithfully? Have I not walked in your ways? Why does this discontent rise within me?" And the Lord, in his mercy, spoke to Elias in a still, small voice. "Elias, my son, your labor has been faithful. But the season for which you were created is now at hand. I am stirring your heart, for I will call you into a land you do not know, to purposes you have yet to see. Rise and trust me. For I am the Lord your God, and I will guide you." Elias' heart burned within him, and though he did not fully understand, he knew he could not remain as he was. And so, he prepared to leave his fields, trusting in the voice of the Almighty. Like Abraham, who left his father's house at the command of God, Elias' obedience was met with uncertainty but also with unwavering faith. Meanwhile, in the city of Jericho, a woman named Miriam sat by her window, gazing at the streets below. Miriam had lived a life of comfort, surrounded by wealth and security, yet her soul hungered for something greater. In the quiet of her chamber, she opened the scriptures and read, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." As the words penetrated her heart, she fell to her knees and wept. "Lord," she prayed, "I have all that the world can offer, yet my soul is barren. I long for your presence, for a purpose that is greater than myself. Show me, O Lord, what you would have me do." That night, Miriam dreamed of a great banquet, where the hungry were fed and the thirsty were given drink. She saw herself among them, serving with joy. When she awoke, she knew that God was calling her to a new season of service and spiritual growth. Leaving behind her lavish home, Miriam ventured into the streets, seeking the poor and the broken, trusting that God would lead her to her divine purpose. In another corner of the land, a young scribe named Jonah wrestled with questions of his calling. Jonah had always believed that his path was clear, to copy the sacred texts and preserve the Word of God. Yet, in his heart, he felt a pull toward something different, something bold. He began to experience vivid dreams of standing before crowds, proclaiming the Word with power and authority. But fear gripped him, for he doubted his ability to speak. One day, as Jonah sat in the temple, he heard the reading of Jeremiah 29 verse 11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." The word struck him like lightning. Jonah realized that God's plans were far greater than his own, and he resolved to step out in faith, trusting that the Lord would equip him for the task ahead. And so, Elias, Miriam, and Jonah, each in their own way, began to walk the path of a new season, But as is often the case, the journey was not without trials. For Elias, the road was marked by closed doors. He traveled to a neighboring town, seeking work to sustain himself. But every opportunity seemed to slip through his fingers. Frustrated and weary, he knelt by the roadside and cried, "Lord, have you brought me here to abandon me?" The Lord replied, "Elias, my son, the doors that close are not meant to harm you but to guide you. Trust in me, for I am leading you to a place of great blessing." And so, Elias pressed on, his faith tested but unbroken. In time, he found himself in a village where the people were in desperate need of a leader to organize their harvest. Elias stepped into the role, and the village prospered under his care. He realized that God had been preparing him all along for this purpose. Miriam's path was one of unexpected challenges. As she ministered to the poor, she faced criticism from those who did not understand her calling. "Why would a woman of your stature lower herself to such work?" they scoffed. But Miriam held fast to the vision God had given her. One day, she met a mother and child on the brink of starvation. Miriam shared her own food with them, and as she did, she felt the presence of God so strongly that she wept with joy. "Truly," she thought, "I have found the banquet of the Lord." Jonah, too, faced his fears as he stepped into his new role. The first time he stood before a crowd, his voice trembled, and doubt threatened to silence him. But as he prayed for strength, he felt the Spirit of God fill him with boldness. The words flowed like a river, and the people listened with rapt attention. From that day forward, Jonah became a powerful voice for the Lord, bringing many to faith and inspiring others to trust in God's plan. Through their journeys, Elias, Miriam, and Jonah came to understand the signs of God's shifting hand. They recognized that holy discontent, spiritual hunger, a sense of purpose, closed doors, and divine opportunities were all part of his divine orchestration. Each challenge was a stepping stone, and each victory a testimony of God's faithfulness. As they shared their stories, others began to see the signs in their own lives. The restless worker, the seeker of truth, the one who felt abandoned in the face of closed doors, all found hope in the testimonies of those who had gone before them. They realized that God was not distant but deeply involved in their journeys, preparing them for greater things. And so, the land was filled with the sound of voices proclaiming the goodness of the Lord. They sang of his faithfulness, declaring, "The God who began a good work in us will be faithful to complete it." They encouraged one another to step into their new seasons with courage, trusting that the one who calls is faithful. Even now, the story continues. For those who feel the stirring of God's hand, who sense the winds of change blowing through their lives, know this: you are not alone. The same God who guided Elias, Miriam, and Jonah is guiding you. He is closing doors to open greater ones, stirring your heart to seek him, and preparing you for a season of purpose and blessing beyond what you can imagine. Trust in him. Step out in faith, and watch as he writes a beautiful new chapter in your story, for his glory and your good.